May of 1913 was rather warm, stories told, and as people were coming to the theater on the Champs Elysees in Paris to watch The Rite of Spring, they were, as they would have been for the time, dressed to the hilt. Women would wear these hats with the feathers, very expensive kind of decor, and they weren't really expecting what was about to happen. So, we have some accounts from 1913, May of 1913, about the scandal that broke out due to the Rite of Spring. Carl Van Vechten, he was a journalist, he was a music critic, was in the audience, and he said that once the curtain went up, there were already hisses and boos kind of um, upset about what they were hearing. And if you listen to the Rite of Spring, it sounds almost as if the orchestra is just tuning up. Like, no, they're not. This is all written down. I mean, they're folk melodies in the Rite of Spring and everything, but they're orchestrated in such a way that it's very dissonant. So it sounds almost like the orchestra is just kind of tuning up where they're ready to play, but this is actually what you're hearing. And so there are already boos and hisses, and when the dance of the adolescence begins, it has this very distinctive rhythm, just junk, 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 junk. That Carl Van Vechten said a person stood up behind him and started punching him in the back of the head to that rhythm. There were other comments. Stravinsky wrote of this himself. He was at the premiere and he was very upset with what was happening. That somebody shouted to shut up, you bitches of the 16th. This is the women of the 16th arrondissement in Paris who sat up in the corner, and it was a very ritzy section of the theater, and I guess they were catcalling, just boo, and somebody said, shut up, bitches of the 16th. Okay, so Stravinsky was very upset by this. He runs backstage. This is what he reported, and Nijinsky, who was the choreographer, was shouting the numbers to the dancers on stage because they couldn't hear the instruments over the crowd. So these are all sort of witness accounts that have come down to us. Like I said, it may be a little overstated. There's been some historical research into this issue that it wasn't quite as well, that wasn't a scandal, but it wasn't like this earth-shattering event. That 3 weeks later, the Rite of Spring was performed again, and it was well received. So once you got over that initial shock, it was well received, and the ballet may have been the reason why it got most of the criticism anyway. Because I'm not a dance scholar. I've read a little bit of dance scholarship, but the theory is that the dance was not up to snuff. It was very simplistic. Like I said, it's very angular, kind of just jumping around. If you watch the Joffrey ballet, you get a sense of this reconstruction. That was what the riot was about, not so much the music. There are different reports on this. Different historians have different ideas. Richard Taruskin has mentioned this in his writing. He's a Russian historian. He's a Russian musicologist. Musicologist of Russian musical history, and he's written about this at length. One of my favorite blogs, she's no longer with us, unfortunately, is Not Another Music History Cliche by Linda Shaver Gleason. I'll link that to our Blackboard site if you're interested in this stuff. But she wrote about how this has really been overstated. She had a beautiful blog post about it. So it's something that every music history book talks about, but it is worth mentioning. At least there's a story, but just try to break it down for you. Again, some of these reports about it being a riot didn't really come out until about 1924, which is about a decade later. So it's like, did it actually happen, or was that just something that embellished for a scandal? So everybody loves a scandal. So adding to the mystique of Stravinsky. So anyway, that is the Rite of Spring. Do watch the video if you can. I recommend it. A little troubling, certainly the story. It is an example, let me go back to this, of what we call primitivism. I didn't mention this, primitivism. This was a sort of an artistic aesthetic as well as an anthropological aesthetic of the late 19th, early 20th century. Artistic primitivists idealized not only rural life, but a simpler, less stratified life. So it's almost utopian. So you people back then, at least the thinking goes, that they had an ideal. They knew right from wrong inherently, instinctually, and lived off the land, and how wonderful this was. Stravinsky's kind of here, you're making it like, and it's very interesting. The girl doesn't she wants to be sacrificed. So in the story, it's not like she's terrified of this. She's actually a willing participant. So this whole idea of like ritualistic truth and really comes into play. There's a bit of sort of racism here as well, or at least the idea of a primitive is usually we call, like anthropologists calling some cultures primitive in the early 20th century, would be considered racist today. Like you look at tribes in Africa and calling them primitive because they haven't advanced the way the Europeans have. There's certainly a racial element there. It's very problematic for historians to wrestle with, especially today when we're so conscious of these social issues. So it does come up in anthropology. This was old anthropological thought. It's no longer considered anthropological thought. This is would be what Western Eurocentrism. But primitivism was sort of an artistic movement within anthropology, or grew out of anthropological thinking, and it grew out of Romanticism. Actually, it grew right out of this advocation for the folk, the peasants. So you look even further back, and you look even to more societies that were maybe tribal, and the idea was you found truth there. Like society was somehow something to avoid, and the truth was in something foreign and something old, something in this case very ancient. It's in this case maybe imagined, because the Rite of Spring, I don't know if prehistoric pagan Russians ever practiced human sacrifice. This may have been invented just to suit the purpose. So it's not like this is an accurate portrayal of Russian life, but it was set in this time when people were closer to the land and their religion and their rituals, and therefore closer to the truth. Just things to think about. 1920, Stravinsky changes direction yet again. And he, like I said before in a previous video about neoclassicism, that he becomes instrumental as a neoclassical composer. We've talked about neoclassicism, this resurrection or bringing back of old forms and old sounds and making them modern. So those modernistic techniques that Stravinsky brings really fit well with old forms. His first foray into this is another ballet for the Ballet Russe at Pulcinella, about an 18th century topic. So it has a very 18th century sound. So it almost sounds like something Mozart would have written, although we think it was by Pergolesi. That doesn't seem to be true. May have been by a bunch of people, but it was long thought to have been the original music by Giovanni Battista Pergolesi that Stravinsky then riffed on. But it sounds very 18th century. It's got the periodic structure, the kind of phrase and the antecedent, very symmetric in terms of phrasing. The characters come out of the Commedia dell'arte, this traveling group of performers, circus performers, clowns. Pulcinella and his girlfriend Pimpinella are key characters in this story. It's kind of a love story, sort of a comedy, kind of a reference to Pierrot. We talked about Pierrot or Pierrot. My French is terrible. I apologize. That Pierrot comes from the Commedia dell'arte. So we'll talk about Pierrot again when we talk about Schoenberg and the Pierrot Lunaire. So Pulcinella, I'm going to post that to YouTube, so have a listen to that. Sounds very different from Rite of Spring. I mean, it's hard to believe this is the same composer. I mean, this is the thing Stravinsky is all about. He's like I said, a musical chameleon. Give you two other examples here, just of neoclassical Stravinsky. The Octet for Wind Instruments. This is about 1923, where he actually dives into old forms. So we have three movements here. It's for wind instruments. So this is something interesting. Stravinsky was trying to remove overt emotion from his music, and he saw the string section as inherently romantic. So winds were a little less sappy, so let's write music for wind instruments. He does this on several occasions. Symphonies of wind instruments, is a concerto, piano concerto for piano and winds, and then, of course, the octet for wind instruments. So it all fits in this objectivist sort of trying to write a more objective music. So trying to remove emotion or remove overt emotion. You can't, I mean, it may be impossible to remove emotion entirely, but at least trying to play that down a little bit. Three movements here, a sinfonia you can see here, like a symphonic opening movement. You've got a theme and variations in the second movement. It's all based on this very chromatic theme. You get a good sense of the wrong note technique and the white music with this piece, the kind of pan-diatonicism, as well as I think the octatonic scale as well. So, and that theme with variations is the octatonic scale. So it comes from the octatonic scale. So this new sound, but with an old form. The finale. I think the first movement is in sonata form, sonata allegro form. We talked about that. So this didn't die. It didn't like it went away, but just writing music that's not programmatic. So here, you're well into neoclassical territory. So have a listen to that. I'm going to finish up with the Symphony of Psalms, only because this is a local. This was written for our very own Boston Symphony Orchestra. It wasn't premiered by them. They gave the American premiere. It was premiered somewhere in Europe. I can't remember exactly where. But it was given the American premiere by the Boston Symphony Orchestra and Serge Kuzovitsky, the conductor at the time, who brought to life a lot of major 20th century repertoire. We're going to talk about the Concerto for Orchestra by Bartók. That was also written for the Boston Symphony Orchestra. This is a choral symphony. So, like the Beethoven 9. Okay, so you have, in this case, the chorus is in all three movements. Setting of Psalms 38, 39, and 150. It is set in the Latin Vulgate from the Latin Vulgate Bible. You have the three movements here, all in the Latin. The chorus sings in all three movements. So this idea of religiosity and objectivity, because what Stravinsky does is he removes the upper strings from the orchestra. So this is, winds play a major role. He's got low strings, and he's got percussion. So you're removing that violin sound, that inherent romanticism, not here. So, but it still has this very sacred type a feel to it. So, again, trying to tap into something old, like Psalms, something like religion, we think of as a 19th century idea, like the big romantic choral works, but making them modern. Octatonic scale, I believe, in use here as well. So, I will load that to YouTube, to the YouTube channel, the listing channel, so you can have a listen to that. Other works I forgot to mention that are in this great choral tradition: Brahms, Verdi, and Dvorak. I'm running out of time here, so I'll show those to you. I'll see you next time.